Welcome to Reaching Out. I'm Gregory Floyd, President Local 237 Teamsters. Today, our very special guest is broadcast journalist and author Rene Syler. Rene, welcome to Reaching Out.
Hey, Greg, how are you?
I'm doing fine.
Good to see you and
Good
sit
to see
across
you also.
from you.
And thank you for coming on the show. I'm sure it's going to be an interesting one. We want to hear your point of views on, I'm going to say, life in general.
I don't know that we have that much time, actually.
Well, in the few minutes that we do have, we're going to let our audience know that Rene is a former broadcast journalist for CBS, and she was on the CBS, I would say, morning show.
Yeah, it's called The Early Show.
The Early Show. And I get confused.
But why do
with
we
all the
want to
shows.
give them publicity since they fired me? So
That I didn't know. I thought you left on your own accord, but you let everybody know. Unfortunately, they made a mistake, and I haven't watched the show since.
Okay, there you go.
Harry's great, but he's the only one I recognize on the show, and I don't.
And
watch
he's not
the show.
on the show anymore.
See, I don't even know that. I don't watch the show any longer. Wow, that's something. But you have been doing a lot of things since you've left CBS. Since they let you go, you have not stopped your journey. You have a book that's out, your first book, Good Enough Mother, and you also do a lot of work for cancer, breast cancer in particular, and you also have a website where you give advice. You have a degree in psychology, and what we want to hear is how does one get a degree in psychology and move into the TV world?
Wow. You know, for a minute there, I felt like this is your life. Do you remember that show?
Yes, I remember that show.
When you were running that down, I was like, am I old enough to have really accomplished all of that stuff? But I guess so, right?
And I think I'm old enough to remember.
Yeah, right. No, the proper response from you would be, you don't look it. So
you don't. You really
okay,
don't. And our radio listeners cannot see that.
Yeah.
However, our cable broadcast network listeners, and if you listening on the radio, please try to catch the show on cable TV.
Yeah.
You'll be able to see that, and you'll say, "Hey, look!" And you can go to the website. What is your website? So
it's goodenoughmother.com. Right. You can go to the website, and you too can see that I really, though I sound like I'm 48, and in real life I'm 48, but I look like I'm 26. And in my head,
you don't sound like you're 48.
And in my head, I'm also 26. But you know, you asked how I went from this degree in psychology to journalism, and you know, I'm not really sure. I feel like so much of what happened to me in my career and my career path was nonlinear, and I think a lot of life is that way. When we're sort of growing up and going to school, we assume that you go to school to get a political degree and you end up in politics. You go get a business degree and you end up in business. It's not always that way, and you really sort of have to be open to whatever presents itself. So I had this degree in psychology. You know, here I am with this bright, shiny diploma, and I hated it. I hated it. And I thought, what am I going to do now? And I was reading about Liz Walker, who was at the time the highest paid African-American anchor woman in the country in Boston. And I was reading about her because she was single, 36 years old, she was pregnant, and everybody was up in arms about that. And I thought, you know, it's not like she's 16 years old and single and pregnant.
She was the Murphy Brown at that time.
She was the Murphy Brown at that time, right? And there was a big uproar because, of course, as we know, the rates of single parenthood among African Americans is very high. So there were a lot of people who were saying, you know, you're a role model, and why would you do that? So that's how she got on my radar. And when I started reading about her a little bit more, I thought, I could do that. I like that. I'm gonna go for that. So I was working in Sacramento, California, waiting tables at TGI Fridays, putting myself through college.
Right.
And I just got an internship.
Are you from Sacramento?
I'm from Sacramento originally. Yeah, from a California girl. And I got an internship at a TV station. I knew nothing, and they were smart enough or foolish enough to let me, let me in. And I just was like a sponge, and I soaked everything up. And then 6 months later, I got a job in television in Reno. And that's where I started my career, Reno, and then I went to Birmingham and Dallas and then New York.
Let's talk about not your passion, but your advocacy for breast cancer awareness, and also of course, you're probably a philanthropist for breast cancer. You raise money for breast cancer. Let's talk about that.
I am the daughter of 2 breast cancer survivors. Now, when you tell people that, it takes, they're like, what? I don't get it. My father had breast cancer. Breast cancer is, though more rare in men, does occur in men. And it's something like 1,900 cases every year occur in men. My mother had breast cancer as a postmenopausal woman. I am the daughter of 2 first-degree breast cancer survivors. And so what that meant was that I was having to be heavily screened and on and on and on. In 2003, I was diagnosed with a condition called hyperplasia atypia, which is kind of the stage right before breast cancer. If you look at a mammogram, and women should be getting mammograms, a baseline at 40, unless there is a family history, at which point you need to talk to your doctor and be guided that way. But a woman needs to have a baseline mammogram, the very first one, at 40. When I would have my mammograms, they would show up with these little specks on them, and those were what's called microcalcification. It's an indication to the doctors that there is something wrong, and then they got to go in, biopsy it, put it on the microscope, see if it's cancer. I did that 4 times in 4 years. And at the end of the 4th time, and these were very aggressive biopsies, and at the end of that 4-year period, I just realized this is not how I wanted my life to play out. This is not how I pictured it. Mm-hmm. I was a young woman, I had a young family, excuse me, and it just wasn't how I wanted to live. And so I was being treated at Memorial Sloan Kettering, big cancer hospital here in town, and my doctor and I started talking about preventive surgery. And so I ultimately opted for what's called a preventive mastectomy or prophylactic mastectomy. I didn't have cancer, but I had my breasts removed and implants replaced before cancer showed up. So that's my.
That's you were on Oprah Winfrey. I believe.
Did do
you
Oprah.
Were one of the.
Yes, she followed me through my surgery. It's not a surgery for everyone, but it was the decision for me. And people ask all the time, well, what did your husband think? And I thought, well, they're really not his breasts, so it didn't really matter what he thought. But he was very supportive, and he understood that ultimately this was about me being around for my family. And if a part of me was gone, but the whole of me was here, that was what was important.
Rene, I could say we certainly enjoyed you here this afternoon, and we want to say we'd like you to come back
of course,
and talk to us some more. We want to get to this part 3 of the three-legged stool, your hair. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this segment.
You go to the website; it's all explained there.